The summer sun burned high above the little town of Clay Ridge. It was auction day. In the middle of the dusty square, the sheriff stood on a wooden platform with a girl beside him. Her name wasn't announced yet, but everyone could see she was young, maybe 19. Her hair was messy, her cheek was bruised, and her eyes never looked up. She stared at the dirt, silent. "This here's the last lot of the day," the sheriff called out. "Healthy, obedient, 19 years old." A hush fell across the square. Some folks shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in, curious. No one spoke of how wrong it all felt, but they all stayed. At the edge of the crowd stood a tall, weathered man. His name was Elias Carter, a widower, 42 years old, the only black man in town who owned land. His fists were clenched at his sides. He didn't come here to buy anyone. He'd come for supplies, and maybe to forget the loneliness waiting for him back at his quiet cabin. But the girl, this girl, stood there like a broken branch that hadn't fallen yet. Something in Elias shifted. $20, someone called. It was a man named Hank Dobbs, the owner of the saloon. He laughed as he said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. $25, another voice said. That came from Bill Harper, a farmer known for his short temper and heavy hand. The girl flinched. Elias looked down at the small leather pouch in his coat. Inside were $75 in gold. That was all he had left. He'd saved it for planting next season, his only chance to keep the farm alive. He stepped forward. 50. The crowd turned, stunned. White faces blinked in disbelief. Hank Dobbs sneered. "What's he going to do with her?" "I won't sell my daughter to—" the father began. 70, Elias interrupted. His voice was steady. "In gold." The sheriff hesitated. His eyes flicked between the bidders. "Mr. Carter, I don't know if this is—" "The law says any free man can place a bid at public auction," Elias said, "unless you'd like to explain to a federal judge why the highest bid was denied." Silence. The sheriff cleared his throat. 70, going once, going twice, sold. The gavel hit. Whispers turned to angry murmurs. But Elias didn't flinch. He walked calmly toward the platform. The girl stepped down, moving slowly, like someone used to pain. Her arms had older bruises. Her shoulders curled inward. Elias didn't reach for her. He simply asked, "What's your name?" Her voice barely made a sound. "Anna. Anna Briggs. I'm Elias Carter," he said. She looked up just for a second. "I know who you are," she whispered. They began to walk through the crowd. People stepped aside, but not out of kindness. Some spat near Elias's boots. Others muttered words they didn't dare say aloud. As they passed the saloon, Hank Dobbs laughed again. $70, he jeered. "High price for something you can't keep, Carter." Elias said nothing. He helped Anna into the wagon, where his old horse waited. She was trembling, not from fear of him, but from everything that had come before. "I won't hurt you," Elias said softly. She looked into his eyes then, for the first time. What she saw wasn't pity. It was something else, something she hadn't seen in a long time. "Why?" she asked. He waited until the wagon rolled forward, then said, "Because I know what it's like, to be treated like a thing." They rode in silence past the fields and the oaks. Neither of them spoke again until the town was far behind them. But in Anna's shoe, hidden tight, was a small metal key. And in the shadows of Clay Ridge, someone had seen her glance and nodded. By the time they reached Elias's land, the sky had turned a deep blue. The sun had vanished behind the hills, leaving a quiet hush over the fields. The wagon creaked as it rolled past the edge of a dried-up garden. Anna glanced around silently. She saw a modest cabin, a small barn leaning to one side, and a well made of stone near a patch of wilted herbs. Elias climbed down and looked up at her. "This is it," he said. "It's not much, but it's mine, and nobody's going to bother you here." Anna didn't move at first. Her eyes were scanning the area, measuring distances, watching the tree line, looking for escape routes. Elias noticed, but said nothing. When she finally stepped down, she stayed several feet behind him, like someone used to walking in someone else's shadow. "There's a room in the back," Elias said. "It was my son's. It has a lock on the inside." At the word son, Anna blinked. A small crease appeared in her brow. "Your son?" she asked quietly. "Jacob," Elias replied. "He and his mother passed 2 winters ago. Pneumonia." His voice didn't shake, but the space between the words held the weight of a broken heart. Inside the cabin, a small oil lamp burned on the center table. Anna saw it and froze. Someone had been here recently. Elias saw the change in her face. "Wait here," he said gently. He walked inside first, checking every room. When he returned, his face was calm. "Ruth must have come by," he said. "She leaves food sometimes." Anna spoke softly. "Ruth Wilkins?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "You know her?" "She delivered my mother, a long time ago." The inside of the cabin was simple but neat. Books lined the shelf in perfect rows. The floor was swept. The table was worn but polished. This wasn't the house of a man who had given up. It was the home of someone still fighting for something, though what, Anna couldn't yet tell. Later that night they sat at the table. The food Ruth had left was warm, plain, and filling. Anna barely ate. She was tense. Her fork barely moved. Her shoulders never relaxed. Elias watched her for a while. Then he spoke, calm and quiet. "You plan to run tonight, don't you?" Anna froze. He didn't raise his voice. "I don't blame you," he said. "But the Eastern Forest has patrols. 3 bounty hunters. The mayor hired them after some folks escaped from the Sullivan place." "I'm not a slave," Anna said sharply. "No," Elias replied. "You're not, but try telling them that in the dark." The silence between them grew heavy. Anna looked down. Her hands shook slightly. She wasn't used to kindness, especially the kind that asked for nothing. The next morning the cabin was quiet. Elias was gone. The door was unlocked. Anna stood in the doorway, sunlight spilling across the floor. Through the window she saw him, in the garden, kneeling by the roots, pouring water carefully into the dry earth, as if he still believed something could grow there. She walked quietly through the house, not to flee, but to search. Inside a drawer she found something unexpected, a book, worn, thick, and full of handwritten notes, federal laws. Beside it lay letters, some signed by someone named Professor Benton from Boston University. Anna's fingers stopped on one particular page. The corner was marked, the ink underlined. Property seizures must be proven necessary and lawful under federal oversight. Before she could read more, she heard the sound of hooves. She moved to the window. 3 riders were coming up the path. She knew them all: Hank Dobbs, Bill Harper, and a third man, taller, dressed in a fine coat, with a hat pulled low over his eyes. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Elias stood up, wiping his hands, and walked to meet them. "Carter," Dobbs said, pretending to be friendly. "We're here to introduce the new judge, Judge Lawson." The tall man tipped his hat. "Mr. Carter," he said smoothly, "we're doing property reviews, updating county records." "My taxes are paid," Elias replied. The judge nodded. "It's not about taxes, it's about productivity. Unused land may be reassigned for better use." Anna watched Elias's face. He didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. "This land's been mine since 1871, he said, "and the papers are in order." Dobbs chuckled. "Times change, Carter. So do laws." The riders turned and left,
but the air they left behind was thick with warning. Anna stood in the doorway. "They want your land," she said. "They always have," Elias replied. "But why? It's half dead." Elias looked at her for a moment and didn't answer. Not yet. That afternoon, the sound of wheels crunching over dry earth came from the road. A wagon pulled up, driven by a woman with sharp eyes and a calm strength in her posture. Ruth Wilkins, midwife, messenger, and one of the few in town who still moved freely between walls others couldn't cross. She climbed down with a crate of supplies. "Judge Lawson visited 5 more properties today," she said, handing Elias a small sealed envelope. "All owned by black folks or immigrants." Elias nodded, as if he'd already expected it. Ruth turned to Anna, gently lifting her wrist and inspecting the fading bruises. "They haven't healed right," she said quietly, "but they will." Anna didn't speak, but something in her chest loosened, just a little. Ruth handed Elias the envelope. "Jenkins said to deliver this without drawing attention."
Elias read it silently. His face changed. The calm he wore like armor turned sharp, eyes focused, jaw set. "Anna," he said, "I need to know exactly what you overheard at your father's meetings with Mayor Carlton." Anna stared at him, stunned. "How do you know about that?" Before Elias could answer, Ruth stepped in. "You're not the first girl we've tried to help," she said gently. And just like that, Anna understood. He hadn't bought her to own her. He'd bought her to save her. Anna sat down slowly, that tiny metal key in her shoe suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "My father keeps a red book," she whispered. "Locked in his desk, payment records, names, dates. He and Mayor Carlton have been planning something big. It has to do with the judge and land near the river." Elias and Ruth exchanged a look, a quiet one, heavy with realization. "So that's why he didn't care what happened to you," Ruth said. "You knew too much." Anna's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've seen what they've done, what they plan to do." In town, rumors were already swirling. Folks whispered about the black man who dared buy a white girl, about lights at night on his property, about his land suspiciously close to the planned railroad line. No one noticed the missing red book. No one noticed the coded messages sent by telegraph after dark. But in the shadows, something was happening. 4 nights later, a sudden storm hit Clay Ridge. Rain slammed down. Streets turned to rivers. Most people stayed in. One did not. A small figure slipped through the night, cloaked in black. Anna. While the rain masked her footsteps, she crept behind the town hall. In her hand was the key she'd hidden in her shoe since the day of the auction. She found the mayor's office window already cracked open, slipped inside, and went straight to the drawer. It opened with a soft click. Inside were maps, documents, receipts, all signed by men who thought no one would ever see them. At the same time, across town, Elias walked into the telegraph office, soaked to the bone. Jenkins, the quiet operator who rarely spoke above a whisper, simply nodded. "The wire's open," he said, "to Boston." The next morning the sun returned as if nothing had happened, but something had. A crowd gathered near the town square. Pamphlets were posted on every public door, the church, the market, even City Hall. People stopped to read them. Their faces slowly changed from confusion to anger to something else, realization. Mayor Carlton burst out of the tavern, holding one of the sheets. "This is a lie," he shouted. "A complete forgery." A voice behind him replied calmly, "Including your signature on every page, Mayor?" It was the man from the railroad company, flanked by a federal agent, and a reporter from the Boston Globe. The mayor turned pale. Judge Lawson tugged at his collar. "The cabinet was locked," he muttered. "No one else has the key." "You sure about that?" the agent asked, tilting his head. Walter Dunn, one of the crooked landowners, tried to slip out the back of the crowd, but found the sheriff waiting. "You knew?" Dunn hissed. The sheriff gave a tired nod. "Not everything, but enough not to stop what's coming." From the steps of the church, someone else appeared. Anna, no longer shaking, no longer silent. Reverend Cole stood beside her. "This young woman," he announced, "has risked everything to bring truth into the light." Anna stepped forward. Her voice rang clear. "You sold me," she said to the crowd, her eyes locked on her father who had just arrived. "Like I was less than human." "And you?" She turned to the mayor. "Sold this town." The silence cracked like thunder. Her father lunged toward her, but the federal officer raised his hand. "I wouldn't do that," he said coldly. "Your daughter's already told us more than enough." A deputy stepped forward and handed Judge Lawson a letter. The judge's hands trembled as he read it. "From the Massachusetts Bar," the deputy said. "They're curious how a man expelled for fraud is now serving as a judge." The mayor spun around in panic. "You can't do this! This town is mine." "Was," said the railroad representative. And just like that, the walls began to fall. The train whistle blew long and low as it pulled into Clay Ridge. It was no longer just a rumor. The railroad was real. Steel tracks stretched across the edge of Elias's land, and workers were already unloading crates, measuring plots, hammering new stakes into the soil. But this time, the land was not being stolen. It was being respected. Elias stood beside the tracks, quiet as always, watching the men work. The representative from the Continental Company had met with him 2 days ago, papers signed, titles confirmed, and most importantly, no bribes, no threats, just recognition. That his land, the very soil others had tried to take, was now the heart of a new trade route. That recognition didn't come easy. It had been earned. Back at the cabin, things had changed too. The garden that once withered in the heat was beginning to grow again. Not just plants, but laughter, voices, movement. A classroom had started under the wide oak near the well. What began as Elias teaching 3 black children to read on the porch had grown. Now there were children from all backgrounds, black, white, immigrant, sitting together on logs and benches, spelling words on slates and asking questions about the stars. And at the front of it all was Anna. She moved through the group with quiet authority, gently correcting a boy's handwriting, helping a girl sound out a word, telling a joke that made even the shyest child laugh. Her voice, once so timid, now rang with purpose. Reverend Cole had married them in a simple ceremony, no fanfare, just a few witnesses, a clean white dress Ruth had stitched herself, and the vows spoken under the same tree where Elias had once promised her safety. Anna Carter now. But titles didn't matter. What mattered was what they were building. One afternoon, as the children packed up their books and chased each other through the field, Anna stood beside Elias, watching the light filter through the trees. "I never thought I'd be a teacher," she said softly. "I used to believe I didn't have anything worth saying." "You had fire in you," Elias replied, sanding down a new bench. "You just needed air to breathe." Anna smiled, the memory of who she used to be flickering like a faraway candle. That girl was still part of her, but no longer in control. In town, things had shifted. Mayor Carlton was gone, serving time in the state penitentiary for fraud, extortion, and attempted land theft. Judge Lawson had disappeared in the night. Rumor said he was arrested under a false name up north. Hank Dobbs. He'd lost everything. The tavern, the land. Now he worked down by the river, unloading cargo with the same hands that once threw dice and insults in equal measure. And Anna's father? He became a ghost. Once loud, commanding, full of pride, Now he walked the back alleys of Clayridge like a man already gone. Folks stopped greeting him. Some crossed the street when they saw him. Others simply looked away. The shame clung to him heavier than chains. But at the Carter homestead, the future was being reshaped. Ruth Wilkins arrived one evening with news. "We've had word from Professor Benton," she said over dinner. Jenkins and the sheriff were there too, both now trusted allies. "He's accepted the proposal to expand the school project," Ruth continued. 15 scholarships for local children. Anna's fork paused mid-air. 15? 15 lives transformed, Ruth repeated, her smile soft but proud. Anna touched the small scar on her wrist, the one left by the rope her father had used the day she tried to run years ago. It had faded now, but never disappeared, like a page in a book she couldn't rip out. But that scar no longer marked her as property. It marked her as proof. Proof that what was once broken could be rebuilt into something better. Outside, the sound of a distant train echoed again. Not a sound of power, not a sound of fear, but a promise. That Clayridge was no longer a place where secrets hid in the corners. It was becoming a place where futures were written, in ink, in chalk, in steel rails that stretched farther than any of them had ever dreamed. The ceremony at the station was small, no brass bands, no marching flags, just people, honest, tired, hopeful people, gathered on the platform as the first commercial train pulled into Clayridge. The new mayor, a soft-spoken businessman elected after the special vote, gave a speech about progress and unity. His words were fine, polished, safe, but it wasn't his voice the people came to hear. It was the quiet presence standing just off to the side, Elias Carter, and beside him, Anna. A woman leaned in close to Anna, someone who had once looked away when she passed on the street. Her eyes were wet, her voice trembling. "My son. They gave him a job, at the station. They never would have taken a boy like him before." Anna looked up. The boy was standing proudly in a railroad uniform, one leg slightly shorter than the other. He waved at her, beaming. Anna's smile this time was real. "We didn't do it alone," she said. As the train let out another breath of steam and began its journey down the track, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Some talked of the future. Others just stood still, taking in what had changed. Later that evening, Anna and Elias walked home under a sky painted orange and gold. The town below shimmered with light, lamps glowing in windows, smoke curling from chimneys, laughter echoing down cobbled alleys. Clayridge wasn't perfect. It still had scars, but it was alive in a way it had never been before. "I used to want revenge," Anna said quietly, her hand brushing over the fence rail as they walked. "When I stood on that platform, being sold like cattle, all I wanted was to make them pay. All of them." Elias nodded. He didn't interrupt. He understood. "But now—" She stopped walking and turned to him, her voice steady. "Now I know freedom isn't just about breaking chains. It's about building something better. It's about making sure there's a place for everyone, even the ones who were told they didn't belong." Elias looked at her, and in her eyes he saw not just strength, but something even rarer, hope. "They told us we were nothing," Anna said, "that I was just property, that you were an outsider, but we proved something." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "We proved our value was never up for sale." The new station tower stood tall on the edge of their land, a beacon of opportunity. And just beyond it, under the old oak tree, children studied by lantern light, their voices rising with questions, laughter, and dreams. In the schoolhouse, maps and books replaced silence and fear. And inside City Hall, once a place of schemes and stolen futures, a new council gathered, diverse, determined, focused not on power, but on people. No one in Clay Ridge could have predicted that the moment a black man placed a bid at a cruel auction would spark the downfall of an empire built on silence and control. But it did. That single, desperate act became the match that lit 1,000 candles. Elias often told his students, "The real revolution isn't about tearing down walls, it's about building bridges, where people once saw only distance." Anna had her own words. "They tried to break us," she told her classroom on their first day. "But sometimes, broken things reflect light in ways whole ones never could." In Clay Ridge, that light had spread, through classrooms, through train tracks, through hearts, and through two souls who once stood on opposite ends of a cruel bargain, but ended up rewriting the story, together, forever.